Yeah.
It's the light blue one.
Yeah.
The camera is not on.
The camera is not on. That's I can see myself.
Okay.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for this webinar. Sorry for the delay. We had to deal with technical issues. We are under the weather here in the city of Gqeberha, so that affected the connection. Today with us, we've got Prof. Haynes with his team that he will introduce shortly. We want to welcome him and his team. The topic of the day is the expanded economics of language reports, insights from 4 linked research projects. We have worked with Prof on various papers, and he's got a very, vast wealth of knowledge when it comes to this subject matter. And I'm sure you will enjoy his presentation. And without me wasting much time, over to you, Prof. I welcome you and the team, and over to you. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Kindly switch off the camera, Tamila. Thank you. For when?
Sorry, is it?
Okay. All right. The camera is off, Luto.
Yeah.
Prof, you may.
Yeah, okay, can the workshop hear me? Right. Right. So anyway, good morning, colleagues, comrades, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and very much important, the national and international participants. We're really pleased that you're with us today. We're going to be looking at the expanded economics of language reports. These are 4 interlinked reports on the economics of language, particularly looking at this at the potential establishment and the impact of and projected impact of such a body, the South African Language Practitioners Council, but more generally also looking at some of the implications, the crucial implications for an economics of language approach that as impacts on the language sector and the language economy. This was preceded in 2022 by an introductory study of the economics of language, which showed how important it was to apply this to South Africa, such an approach. There was very modest scholarship in this country. And there was also a lineage of a couple of related reports. One was a BRICS report, which actually, one of the recommendations was that a virtual language academy be established to teach the BRICS trading languages, or to provide instruction in that. And the other particular paper was focused on deaf terminology, and so that was part of a lineage that fed into this expanded economics of language set of reports. So what we're going to do, I'm going to briefly introduce you to the team that are with us who have been presenting. It's myself, it's Grant Hancock, he's economist, Younger Kaba, who's our researcher. She's based up in Pretoria. Ed Richardson, who's an independent researcher. The team on the various 4 reports has a number of other participants. There's Zimlo and Kona, who helped with the initial report. There's Zinshli Kaba, and for the data for the section for the report, which we're going to discuss in terms of the Language Practitioners Council and the kind of data engine, that was Mr. Sergei Gornostyev. I also like to take this opportunity to thank DSAC and PANSALP. From DSAC, Ms. Lisa Combrink and her colleagues. Lisa heads up the National Languages Division, and they've been most supportive and encouraging on this particular venture. the current acting CEO of PanSALB, Mr. Julius Dantili, the board chair, and the outgoing CEO, Mr. Lance Schultz, who is actually also supportive. And a particular thanks in terms of his liaison work and his assistance to the team from DSAC was also from the languages division, Mr. Salim Nisi. Among other people that we have who partly, been researchers and provided support, Ms. Mariette Alberts, particularly in terms of work on the deaf terminology report, which is not part of these current four reports, but does feed into it. Professor Carol Elias and our project management team. I'd like to thank each of you, and anybody I've missed. Just know that you're valued, and it's really important. We're now going to move to looking at the overview of the four reports and I'm going to move to the next slide. So to that ago. And the first report we did in 2022 was looking at economics of language. We'll just let you get the slide if you can just take that back. Yeah. Back. Okay. So understand the economics of language. I mean, this has been a learning experience for the team, and I think DSAC and SACA, and I think one takes something of a touchstone in the approach to research that Marx as studied and interpreted by David Sayer in his wonderful book Marx's Method, talks about the importance of this dialectical relationship between theory and empirical research, or between theory more generally and research. So it's a continuous relationship. It's a dialectical one, and you can find a range of other social theorists who also kind of bear that in mind. Also, as we moved through the study and it intersected with other work, we became aware. We became aware of the importance and the
Just hang on.
yeah.
I can't see it on here.
Is that
I think just.
Apologies for the disruption.
Hello, everyone. Could you kindly, we do apologize for the technical glitch. We are trying to fix it now. Thank you so much. Bye.
Yeah. Please, thank you.
We can hear you now, guys.
Okay, that's great. So, yeah. Right, colleagues. I think we sorted out the technical glitch. Apologies for the disconnection and that. What we're going to do is just move through, get right to the first report. And the first report looked at the economics of language. Historically, it probably originates with the work of Soviet economist Jacob Marshak, who subsequently moved across to England and then to the US. And he examined language and communication as components of economic theory and practice. Funny enough, he took some of his inspiration by looking at the communication and underpinning language aspects of a fighter jet in the Soviet Union, and looked to see how one could actually improve it, both for the pilot and also for control reasons. But the real kind of institutional momentum for such an approach happened in Canada, where you had some tension between the English-speaking Canadians and French-speaking Canadians, and this looked at writings by economists and related social sciences on the socioeconomic relationship between English and minority French speakers, and expanded then to the States, where scholars looked at differing economic returns amongst white African American Hispanic citizens and new immigrants. And then this also intersected with the economics of education subfield, particularly the work of Gary Becker on human capital and the value of language skills in economic development. Okay. Yes. Right. So why it matters? Why does economics of language matters? As scholars such as Grin and Grenier have pointed out, traditional linguistics, the education, and the sciences don't seem to have sufficient or have insufficient policy and economic tools. An EOL approach brings more evidence-based and data-driven perspectives. And it also, this is important, encourages collaboration between economics, education, and linguistics. And given the greater emphasis nowadays on interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary work, and the importance of this in fostering collaborative research and deeper thinking, this makes good sense all around. Briefly, the phases of the development of the economics of language. This is very much a bird's eye view and a snapshot. First of all, there was quite a good deal of emphasis on language as identity, where language was treated as an ethnic or social attribute linked to income disparities and discrimination. Then moved to a human capital approach, or incorporated a human capital approach where language was seen as an investment in skills. I've mentioned Gary Vicker's human capital theory. Then there was some degree of synthesis where language became seen as partly an identity mark, but also an economic asset, and then more integration over time of sociological economic perspectives. We then moved to look at the question of language, human capital, and the global economy, and this has significant impacts for South Africa. If you look at the development of the economic and language approach overseas, a lot of the good international work moved to look at trade and international business, and this has expanded, looked at regional economic development, initially looked at language barriers as a kind of tax on economic activity, although this has been used but also modified over time. And looked at the importance of multilingual capability, and this is very much part of current research in terms of market access and business efficiency. Just to bring us to some rough and ready estimates of the language economy, and often these actually, funny enough, are underestimates, and often look at actual firm production. So from use of services by firms, commercial firms. So in terms of commercial language services, this is valued globally at around 80 billion US in 2026, and it's projected to reach around about 147 billion by 2034. Online multilingual access is unlocking up to 45 trillion in potential economic activity. Is still indicative of the broad scale of the possibility of language sectors, not nationally only, but globally. And in fact, the underrated importance of the language economy. And as governments digitize services, schools, blended learning, and small businesses rely on digital platforms, and language becomes a gateway to participation. That's, it's increasingly important in developmental and business thinking. Language is the internet. This shows how language is important and utilized. Not unsurprisingly, 45% English. In terms of this is an estimate looking at the use of URLs. Second to English, you see German, German, Chinese, and Japanese being influential, and other languages amounting to about 24%. And then we looked at the African trade corridors. We looked at the importance of language, of looking at trading languages, and in Africa, because this is an area of significant potential expansion where South Africa runs a trade surplus. And we looked at the kinds of languages that are important in these sorts of activities: Arabic and French in some of the regions, French, English, Hausa, Swahili and English, French and Lingala, English and Portuguese. So these are very important languages that we actually noted, and has been noted by commentators. So economics of language is where language it provides a site, or helps constitute a site where language, economics, and education meet. So language diversity, let's get this thing out here. Language diversity, culture and identity, and underpins culture, identity, and development. Economic frameworks help us assess costs, benefits, and effectiveness of language policies. And it promotes collaboration between, or should promote collaboration between linguistics, economics, and education sciences. This happens on an uneven basis globally, and hopefully we will see more of this happening in South Africa in the not too distant or the near future. Just to give you, and to move to the related question of the importance of language and foreign language education, there are a range of interesting and significant, in fact, developments, both within Africa and globally. For example, the University of Botswana, in very much recent years, 25 and this year, are looking seriously at centering language in their developmental strategy, and with the universities, and particularly the University of Botswana, we looked to utilize language in its process of becoming a high performance organization, advancing economic diversification and advancing diplomatic aspirations. But within their economic development strategy, language is explicitly and extensively sort of utilized and leveraged. And foreign languages, and we're particularly looking at business foreign languages, reduce trade barriers and promote global businesses. So language, the importance of language in overcoming barriers in trade, and also dealing with the English is sufficient for fallacy. So we need to look at other kinds of major trader languages. Long-term economic growth, it's been estimated by the RAND corporations and Oxford University in the 2022 study that 10% rise in pupils learning Spanish and French would lead to significant supplementation of the GDP of the UK economy. Intensive training in Arabic at school level would actually add, it is estimated, a further 12.6 billion. Also, language learning has a significant impact on, and particularly tradable languages, has a particular impact on individual career development and planning, with personal financial benefits estimated on average of an increase of lifetime earnings of around 2% if one is actually proficient in language. Interestingly, South Africans at the moment are the #1 pick in Saudi Arabia and some other Mid-Eastern economies in terms of their relative multilingual capacities, and the ability to operate multilingually. And this is actually an important facet, and we will return to that subsequently. English proficiency, in a recent report, found that 90% of employees say English proficiency is critical to organizational success. To 92% of employees, this is 1,300 HR managers internationally in 17 countries, say it's more important today than 5 years ago. 81% say integrating AI tools increases the need for workplace English proficiency. 86% say organizations that are fluent English speakers are at a competitive disadvantage. 83% say hiring candidates with insufficient English skills imposes real costs. And 84% of employees predict that within 5 years, organizations in their country will invest in English assessments and education. So language is just not cultural, not only cultural. It's economic infrastructure is important for national economies, including those of South Africa, and for their participation in the global economy. Okay, so the South African language economy. We'll go into a little bit more detail in the report, the individual report coverage. But it's important to realize the relative breadth of the sector. spanning from multilingualism, cultural identity and inclusion, language policy, AI and language technology, education and learning, and also the increasing use of digital platforms. Currently, the language economy is somewhat fragmented institutionally, and the economic linkages leave something to be desired, and this is what we'll deal with. And there's very basic mapping of it. We've initiated that, but far more systematic and extensive economic mapping of the economy. And one of the contentions is long-term, if South Africa takes these sorts of interventions seriously, we are looking at language. South Africa, there's no reason why South Africa can't be one of the major language factories of the world. Then there's a policy conundrum of English in South Africa. Chicago academic Mofwene questions the myth of English as a killer language. Russia and China currently emphasize English as a primary foreign language in their education systems. They say it's crucial for students to gain this, to be effective in terms of globalization, economic growth, and professionalization research. A recent study by a language institute in Mexico says the acquisition of English as a second language should be mandatory for all academics for professionalization, internationalization research, pointing out that over 72% of international academic work, an increasing percentage, is carried out in English. And there's also, you're finding some similar kinds of arguments happening through being commented upon in select African economies. For example, Adiota and others argue that language education plays a central role in driving international trade, investment and growth in Nigeria, and they stress that French, Mandarin, Chinese and Arabic are crucial languages for the country's growth. And this has implications for curricular planning, for universities looking at increasing internationalization, and also linking with the labor market in a more substantive fashion. So the South Africa's multilingual languages, we need to look, it is argued, and this comes out from all four reports collectively, to look for a more balanced approach in terms of our policies on multilingualism, to look for a balanced approach for local and global impact. We need to look more seriously at the socioeconomic underpinnings of indigenous language and how to grow them, and how to look at incorporate these more directly into developmental strategies, both local, subnational and national. We also need to look at South Africa's involvement in the strategic development of international trading languages, Mandarin, French, Spanish, Portuguese, Arabic, and Swahili being among the crucial aspects here. So ultimately strengthening our participation in regional and global economies, and also improving South Africa's overall social and economic capital and human capital assets, which are crucial in successful economic development strategies. Sorry. So we're going to now move to a quick overview of the EOL reports, and I'm going to then pass on to my colleagues to do some certain presentations. So the EOL report, the first one, was a compact commission report. Its primary desktop, it looked at doing preliminary scoping. It looked at exploring language, economies, stakeholders, resources, data, accessibility, and some of also the stakeholders are with us today. Key areas were to analyze sector dynamics, engage stakeholders, mapping practitioners, and considering language tools, funding, and the policy environment. The economic two was to determine what is needed to design a unified, secure, and functional database. And that meant getting really into the mechanics of data engines and a substantive system that could run the proposed and the mandatory, in fact, South African language, the establishment of the South African Language Practitioners Council. Key focus areas were the classification and certification, tracking, membership management, interviews and online surveys, and integration with technology systems. That will be discussed in more detail. Third report was on knowledge and capacity needs assessment to assess skills, qualifications, training gaps, and professional developmental needs. Focus areas included competency levels, gaps in development needs, human language technology integration, and the growing dynamics of human language technology platform interaction, and also certification frameworks. The final one was that of EOL higher education training, and it was again this is a compact commission report, the initial report, and needs to be supplemented with further systematic not so much funding, but extension. And this looks to evaluate tertiary education offerings in alignment with industry and policy needs. Focus areas were program mapping and gap analysis, accreditation and analysis, and then, among other things, looking at the geographic and linguistic coverage. Yeah. And so the reports collectively aim to frame a strategic evidence-based approach to strengthen South Africa's language sector and its economy. And the focus on professionalization, data integration, capacity building, and education reform looks to unlock the economic potential of the language economy while supporting social cohesion and multilingualism. And this, colleagues, needs to be done with an appreciation of the competing strains on the South African Treasury, competing strains on the budget, and the needs to actually find cost-effective, smart ways of expanding the language, the 12 languages in South Africa, and possibly more, and looking to integrate these and providing a sustainability in their use and in their funding. And the other crucial part and central to the endeavours is establishment of a functional, sustainable South African Language Practitioners Council, and it's central to these efforts. And this requires coordinated access across government, academia, and industry stakeholders. It requires, we think, smart public-private partnership to activate it, to make it really significant, and to make it something of an international beacon. We see that as actually very important. We'll now move to research methodology, and I'm going to pass on to Ed Richardson and Younger on this one.
Morning all. You're just playing musical chairs. Back yeah. It's Ed Richardson. Yeah. For me, this is the fun part of any project, which is actually talking to people and finding out new stuff. So the literature review is just looking at, so this is more or less a standard way one does research. So the literature review to find out what everybody else knows and what you now know. And then stakeholder, and that informs the stakeholder engagement. So when we speak to people, we can actually ask vaguely or ask intelligent questions, because we don't repeat what's already there. We find out what we don't know. And then the data collection is sort of, we then also do online surveys, and then we just compile and analyze the data to actually look at and basically see what we've got. Out of that, we then sort of map the ecosystem and see where who plays what roles where, and that's where Grant has done a fantastic ecosystem map on that, and then look at other regulatory models internationally. What we did find is that we're pretty much unique. There's not too many people trying to do what South Africa is trying to do in terms of the council. And then we're looking at surveys, focus groups, conducted qualitative discussions, again, sort of with the focus groups. We go back with our ideas and hopefully have them torn apart and put back together again. And then from that, you get your gap analysis and propose interventions. And this is just the overview of the online surveys that we did. Younger's going to talk to the person-to-person stuff. We actually got a really good response, I think, better than I was expecting. So if you just look at the sort of profile of the people, we got three. Okay, so Yale report 1, 2, 3, and 4. The fourth one we already had much of the data and much of the responses we wanted. We built it into the questions from the start, knowing we wanted to be at the end. So instead of bugging people 3 times for 3 different or 4 times for 4 different interviews, we try to cover as broad a field as possible in the time that people gave us. And then we went back to some people who hadn't asked enough questions or who wanted clarity. So the first one, so we did 189, 149, 10. The nice thing is to see the sort of demographics. It's still a bit heavy on the white side if you look at the South African demographics, but it's pretty well represented on the black side. The language was really nicely spread. The language of the age group was really nicely spread. And then the provinces are reasonably well, all 9 provinces are represented. And then mostly postgraduates actually got, so that shows the academics actually had quite a lot of interest, but also shows probably what our database looked like, because we spread the questionnaires out as broadly as we could through various structures, just to see who we could get to actually answer it. But yeah, we got very good input. With the sort of open-ended questions, people went to quite a lot of trouble there. So we got really nice stuff there. So it wasn't just tick a box anywhere. People, we actually had very good response. So thank you to those who responded. And now I hand over to Yanga.
Thank you so much, Ed. Good morning, colleagues. Morning to all the attendees. For the interviews conducted for the Economics of Languages report, I'll go through report number 1 until report number 4. I also want to give thanks to the colleagues that had assisted with the qualitative methods for these studies. Professor Carol Elias, Ms. Cynthia Taba, who is a master's student at Rose University, Ms. Nkazim Longunga, who's a doctoral student at University of the Western Cape. For the first report, we had 13 interviews where we were trying to understand the language economy and practitioner challenges. So the participants that we had for report number 1 were mainly university students who are in the fields of languages. We also had colleagues in the academic space, so professors from universities in South Africa. We also had key stakeholders from government departments and also institutions that are operating in the language sector. For report number 2, we had 16 interviews in total, and we were focusing mainly on designing a national practitioner database. So the stakeholders that we interviewed for report number 2 were mostly bodies, either private or public, that were already working in the sector of languages. And for report number 3, we had 44 interviews in total. We were basically assessing practitioner skills, capacities, and professionalization needs. For report number 4, we combined all the participants from report number 1, number 2, and we were informing language education, training, and accreditation pathways. And the key stakeholders for report number 4 were accreditation institutions, as well as institutions that deal with qualifications of languages sector. Across all the 4 reports, interviews evolved from exploring the nature and challenges of the language economy to examining professionalization structure, assessing practitioner capacities and development needs, and finally informing language education and training pathways. Together, these reports provided a comprehensive qualitative evidence base for the establishment of the South African Language Practitioners Council and the broader professionalization of the language sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Younger. Okay, we're going to move now on to Grant.
Great, thanks. I think I'll share from my side then if it's easier. Or will you manage the slides there, Ed?
Okay, if you can manage on that side, that's easier, but I'm not sure if you can.
Yeah, I think. Okay, no, you manage them, all right? So let's go to the next slide. So firstly, thanks Ed and Younger and Richard, and hello to everyone. So I'll just talk you through our first report, which was called the mapping, or it's revolved around the mapping of the South African language economy, and it's included a number of components to the study. So firstly, there was the sort of economic analysis of the language sector, looking at what and how the language sector contributes to the economy. We also undertook a policy review, which was expanded on in future reports. Each report did have a policy component to it, and this report was really looking at what is the sort of foundational policy that underpins the sector. And then importantly, there was this mapping exercise attempting to make sense of this fragmented language landscape. And of course, there was quite a significant amount of stakeholder engagement, both through surveys, through interviews, and other direct engagements with key stakeholders in the industry. And ultimately, it was a question of looking at what is the value, what is the employment structure within the sector, what does the institutional landscape look like, and trying to get a grip of what are the dynamics within the language sector. And as has been said already by previous speakers, the language sector is fragmented. We understand this. There are a number of different role players split across the public and the private sector, across academia. There's professionals. There are there's a wide range of people involved, but there really is very little coordination. There's a lot of duplication that exists between services, and there's also gaps in the services that are provided. So another finding of our study was that there's this lack of policy recognition. A lot of role players don't fully understand exactly what the language policy landscape looks like and where they fit into it. Some of the key challenges, again, this fragmentation element comes up again. One thing that came out of the interviews and the engagement with professionals, but there's limited support for the practitioners themselves. And then, of course, in terms of policy, there's this uneven language policy implementation. In terms of the path forward identified through the study is, some of the key findings is that there needs to be an improvement in the data systems. Of course, there needs to be strong institutional coordination. There needs to be improvements made in that front. And again, this idea of the development of the South African Language Practitioners Council should be a very powerful tool to achieve all of these goals and address those challenges. Thanks, Ed. So with the question of what does the language economy add to the economy? What does the language sector add to the economy? There has been work done previously by Prof. Haynes and Prof. Khoos, looking at that first study that was mentioned earlier on in our presentation around the economics of language. And so in our report one, we sort of carried on with that work. We updated some of the figures and we explored a bit deeper, looking very narrowly, and I'll get on to why we have to say very narrowly. The language sector, if we just look at those industries and job functions and that which are directly language related, that adds around 10 billion rand in GBA to the South African economy, which represents, I think, less than 1% of the national economy. And within that, there's around 66 to 70,000 jobs directly related to the languages. But these are only those enterprises, those jobs which are directly language related. And as we make clear in our reports, the language economy cannot be so neatly defined as to exist within one or two subsectors within the economy. It is expansive. It's embedded across a number of different sectors, from public administration and education to legal services to media and cultural industries. Language is ever present in all of these sectors. And at present, there is no separate account, or there's no separate satellite account in the statistical databases, which allows for the visibility of language in these other sectors. And this is a severe limitation in terms of in valuing the impact of the language economy, and the true impact of the sector is thus largely invisible. So significant work needs to be done in future, in partnership with the likes of Statistics South Africa, to try and develop satellite accounts to help make visible these contributions of language across the economy. But at present, even with this narrow definition, the sector is expected to generate around 713 million rand in public revenue per year, and that's on top of only 25 million in direct grants and subsidies from government. So in terms of the value for money, it certainly pays for itself, even with this sort of narrow view of the sector. So again, just for significant data limitations and constraints, the sector is not formally recognized, and it is statistically relatively invisible. And this is largely to do with the fragmentation of the sector across multiple other industries. It's a difficult problem to solve, and it will take some time, but there are other approaches that can be used to better appreciate the contribution of the sector. One of those was used in a previous study, which was developing a gravity model, which looked to see, what the contribution of the sector was to trade and investment. And that study, although it doesn't give us the sort of GDA contribution, it does strongly point to the importance of language in supporting trade and development. And there is one line which I think sums it up, where it says, clearly language makes an essential contribution as a sector of the South African economy, while recognizing that language is ever present in all other economic activities. The estimated specific contribution of language to the South African economy on employment, the contribution of the language sector to GDP, and the importance of language in trade. And I think the important part to add is that it was found in previous studies that a common language between trading partners also plays a statistically significant role in determining trade volume and value. So this common language is clearly important in terms of trade. And the research also finds that this doesn't need to be a native language. In most cases, it's actually a learned language that is shared between nations. Thank you, Ed. So yes, just going on to the next slide, Ed. We also looked quite closely at the various governance models and implications for the language sector. So the research highlighted that there was a clear structural contrast between the language sector and other established professions. In sectors such as law, health, and engineering, for example, statutory councils provide formal systems of registration, accreditation, standard setting, and professional oversight, ensuring both quality assurance and institutional coherence. And in contrast, the South African language sector is characterized by a fragmented governance landscape, with multiple institutions operating across policy, education, and professional domains, but with limited coordination, overlapping mandates, and no central regulatory authority. And this is really the sort of the crux of what the Language Practitioners Council would seek to address. If we go to the next slide. So this fragmentation contributes to inconsistent standards, weak professional recognition, and uneven implementation of language policy. And like I said, the establishment of the council would be a critical intervention in this space with potential to provide a unifying framework for professionalization. However, the analysis in report 1 also emphasizes that its success, or the success of the council, will depend on clear role definition, alignment with existing bodies, and a governance model that avoids duplication while strengthening coordination across the ecosystem. All right, in the next few slides, we'll just go over the ecosystem map that was developed in report 1. So naturally, we have a wide range of stakeholders across the public and private sector and academia. So the main challenge initially was to see how do all of these organizations fit together, who reports to whom, what are the types of relationships that exist between organizations, how do we categorize different types of organizations. So the language map that was developed is very much a sort of a first step towards developing a much more detailed value chain map. But I think it is quite a strong step forward. And the approach, the end result was to first identify various domains. So 6 structural domains were identified. The first being publishing, broadcasting, and cultural production. Second is policy, standards, and coordination, where a lot of the key stakeholders reside. And then we have language services and intermediation, language transmission and education, commercialization and platform development, and then defending language rights. And sorry, Ed, I'll go back to the slide 1 now. But essentially, splitting organizations into these different domains was really focusing on what these organizations do, and so that was what these domains are really focusing on. And then all these organizations and stakeholders were then split into various thematic areas, and that was really what they are focused on. So an organization might be focused on publishing and broadcasting, but it might be focused in terms of its theme, it might be focused on the rights of deaf and sign language, community. So if we go through to that first slide after this, Ed, we'll see the policy, standards, and coordination domain. And here we have the key stakeholders that are setting policy. It's our statutory and regulatory bodies. And then also within this domain, we have knowledge, research, and technical standards stakeholders. And our red lines report are our government departments and show some governance hierarchies. And then we have other lines which show other types of relationships between organizations. So it's a bit much to take in all at once. But if we do see there, we'll also see there in the blue blocks, we have some examples of the types of professions that would reside within each domain. And so there's quite a lot to take in as we go through this map, but and I don't think there's perhaps time to explore it in detail. But I encourage you all to engage with it and to explore it and to see where you and your organization or your profession fits in. And you might have some thoughts on that. There is room for improvement and there's room for expanding it. But the important part is this is the first step towards having a clear picture of what the language sector, the language economy really looks like. Thanks, Ed. I think we can skip through those slides then. Just to summarize then what the key findings are from our interviews. Thanks, Ed. Yeah. So interviews with stakeholders across the language ecosystem revealed very strong support for the professionalization of the sector, particularly in relation to improved recognition of language practitioners. Clearer standards of practice, more standard pathways for career development as well. At the same time, respondents consistently highlighted structural challenges, including the fragmentation of institutions, limited coordination between stakeholders, and the continued undervaluation of language work, especially in Indigenous context. A recurring theme is the tension between formalization and inclusion. While many practitioners support the establishment of regulatory structures, such as the Language Practitioners Council, there are concerns that poorly designed systems could introduce barriers to entry, exclude informal or community-based practitioners, and increase costs without delivering clear benefits. Stakeholders also emphasize the need for practical, benefit-driven systems, including improved access to work opportunities, better visibility of practitioners, and stronger support mechanisms, rather than purely administrative, compliance-focused structures. And that was something we did explore in terms of what the council might look like, and it's explored in future reports in terms of how the council might be able to play those types of roles. So in the final slide on this report, we just have some key findings. Firstly, the first key takeaway was that the language sector is economically significant but under-recognized, that the sector is fragmented and uncoordinated, that duplication exists, and there are still some service gaps that exist within the space. There is a clear need for professionalization with accessibility, accessibility also being a key focus area. There's a very clear opportunity for restructuring and coordination of the sector, and that is obviously would be enabled in part by, for instance, the establishment of the South African Language Practitioners Council. Further than that, there's very clear opportunity that were identified for enhancement of data systems, which will be covered in the future report. And then there's also a need for improved Indigenous language support and improvement in terms of the economic integration within the language sector. Right, so that was an overview of report 1. I'll hand it back to the room and for the next speaker to take us through report 2. Thank you. Sorry, Ed. I don't know. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Stupid. Okay, start again. Okay, so this report is the database. So I was talking to myself. So the stuff that Grant has just gone through now, that informs the design of the actual database itself. So the database is actually quite, technically, it's quite easy to put together. Well, we're told that it's quite easy to put together. The technology is there to run big databases and to put them together. But the trick is all the stuff that goes around actually finding the information and the design itself. So the back end is easy. It's the front end that's a problem. And the reason we start here with financial sustainability is that's the core of the thing. If it can't pay for itself, it's not sustainable over time. There's no point in the exercise. So all of us know databases. All of us have been onto websites where there's stuff that was last done 2, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. All of us are probably sitting on a database which hasn't been updated for the last 6 months. If you don't update them every 6 months, they're pretty much useless. So you have to keep, so your financial stability and all that costs money. Updating it costs money. Getting somebody to phone people or getting someone to send an email to people saying, "Hi, you're still working there. Have you still, you've got a new degree, whatever." That takes money. It has to be done. and then obviously the maintenance of the website and that. So what we're looking at is a professional classification and accreditation that is on the database, and we'll go to that now. And then what we'll develop is a national practitioner database, which is basically the core function of SACO, so as far as we can see it. So you've got a fragmented ecosystem at the moment. So again, if you've got no data, if you don't know what's happening, if you're not measuring anything, it's a mess. You actually don't know what you're doing. So again, the funding model comes up there, sustainable funding and then standard certification. And so what we're looking at is a centralized information hub. We're looking at a hybrid funding approach. It has to start off with public funding. It has to start off with government funding, because practitioners don't. There's incredible support from practitioners, the people we spoke to for this, and for the whole body and that. But the problem is that it's going to need initial funding, and it doesn't have to be huge. And then affordable practitioner fees. So the sustainability will be through practitioner fees. And again, we think the fees are actually quite important, because if you don't pay for something, it's worth nothing. So, whatever you pay for something is what it's worth. So if you're going to get listed in a database, I'm listed in how many databases for free. Then when last I looked at them or updated them, because they don't seem to add any value, because I haven't bought into them. As initial phase is for, and then gradually integration of fees. The whole thing is accessibility. So it's got to be designed that people can access it via cell phone, using zero data or whatever. Fair fee structures so people aren't priced out of the market. And it's got to have sustainability and growth. So as you include different sectors of the language economy, it can actually expand. And then sort of the balanced enforcement is, the whole system's only be as good as your enforcement or your governance of it. So unless you actually can somehow blacklist or penalize or whatever somebody who's operating as a teacher and isn't registered, operating as a journalist and isn't registered, the point is it's useless. You end up with a thing that you got in so the toll road thing in Joburg. So what you want to look at is a standardized classification framework for language practitioners. This is going to require quite a lot more work and quite a lot more discussion and argument. So the systems foundation enables sector differentiation. So what we've come up with to start with, just as a discussion point, is you've got your paraprofessional. So they're your entry-level informal practitioners. So that's your emerging skills, basic training, practical experience, community focus. So people who are working, training in a community or whatever, who've just graduated or even studying at the moment. We need to actually have a tier for them to actually start introducing them into the whole system. And you've got your tier 1, tier 2 professionals who are qualified and experienced, and so they've got accredited qualifications, standardized training, significant experience, general practice. And you've got your experts who are highly specialized. They've got a mastery and a specialization, deep knowledge of what they do. They're leaders, they're mentors, and they're doing research and innovation into language. Registration, the system will need to be able to pick up registration and this is where it gets tricky. I tell you I've got a PhD in whatever in out in Mongolian, and the system's got to be able to check that. So you can either have go into the different, automatically go into the different university databases to see whether that person was registered and whether they got their degree. But we don't think that most universities are there. You're actually going to have physical people following up on the validation of their qualifications. And then accreditation is in validated quality standards. Again, what SACO is going to need to do is actually determine those quality standards and then the career progression. Once you've got those standards, once you know I'm going to start as a paraprofessional, then I'm going to go to professional, then I'm going to go to expert. You've actually got a progression. You've got a progression plan in your career. So it actually provides a clear growth pathway. And this wouldn't only be academics. So the whole thing is you tend to sort of think with academics, but the academics aren't, they're important in terms of the teaching and the training and that sort of thing, and providing the research. But the people who actually go out and earn the money are the people in the marketplace. So we have to find a way of actually recognizing a person in the marketplace who's using language to earn money for the company or themselves. And their data collection is just have to keep going to inform the sector planning. So you know, we need to know we've got a shortage of Mandarin speakers. We need to know we've got a shortage of Arabic speakers or whatever. So we actually then inform the academic sector saying we actually need some more of these graduates. Or we've got too many French graduates. They don't know what to do with themselves. Stop teaching French, whatever. So this is your accreditation professional standards. So your accreditation ensures practitioners meet standards. So that's where that whole quality assurance accreditation is important. So if you're on the database, the value of the database is only going to be as good as its credibility. So if I'm accepted onto the database, it must mean that I've been vetted in some way. So if somebody wants to use my work, wants to use me, they go onto the database and see at what level am I, and you know, how many likes have I got, or how many thumbs up have I got, or whatever. Whenever we do that database, you know, if we go and buy a pair of shoes, we now look and see what everyone comments about it. So we need to be able to do that. You must align with existing qualifications. So you've got to recognize the SALPC must recognize existing credentials. And then this is, I keep saying SACRA, sorry, I meant to say SALPC. It's got to be a coordinating body, and it comes down to, this is actually quite a critical organization. Without an SALPC or something like it, none of this is going to actually happen. It's got to coordinate it, and it's got a big job to do, and it's got to set standards, and it should improve language practitioner system. So accreditation is the primary mechanism for quality assurance. We said that. The report emphasizes principle of alignment rather than duplication. So in other words, we've got to recognize existing qualifications and rather than replace them, but we need new qualifications. And function as a coordinating and standard setting body, so strengthening the system without disrupting. So SALPC sits on the top, it takes a helicopter view, and it coordinates. It helps everybody do their jobs better. The success will depend on the active participation by practitioners, which won't be achieved by regulations. In other words, there need to be workshops that needs to be active, needs to actually add value to the practitioners. The report highlights the importance of incentive-driven participation. So incentives is, I'm going to be more valued, and I'm going to get paid more. That's your improved access to work opportunities. And then recognition of professional status. That came through quite strongly. People feel that they're actually undervalued, that nobody loves them, and the registration systems must be designed to be accessible, beneficial, credible, rather than purely administrative compliance. So you must be able to get into the system. Other people must be able to get into the system. That's good. Anyway. So it enhances the public profile of the practitioners. That expands access on work opportunities, elevates the professional status, and accessible registration. People must be able to go and register themselves, and they must be able to update their own information otherwise, it goes over that. So database design, this is the fun part. Lots of the stuff is fun. As I was saying, the actual back end is not a big deal. You could possibly even do it on Excel, but the guys wouldn't use something similar based on Excel. So you got to database design. So that's the conceptualizing the core infrastructure. Just say it's informed by that map, and will be informed by quite workshops and talking to the industry and talking to people. So that's your overall design. What information do you need, and how you're going to use it and how you're going to present it. And that's the kind of what you have to decide. And then data management, you've got to ensure the integrity and proficiency of the, so there was saying earlier, how do you actually check on the people's accreditation, what they claim, check on their work experience that they're claiming. So that's, we need to automate as much of that as possible, but you're probably going to need people phoning or emailing, checking. System, you've got to define the functional processes, that's to say that stuff in the back end. And the user interface got to be intuitive, accessible platform for users. And then it's also got to be in multiple, it's got to be in all 12 languages. So all our languages got to be in, so that makes it quite a serious piece of work. It's a core infrastructure of the SALPC system, but it's the reason for SALPC actually existing, quite frankly. But it also tells SALPC what it's doing and takes it forward. It's not a simple registry, it's a structured relational system. So yeah, the system must accommodate a wide range of data, biographic, language, competencies, qualifications, accreditation status, work, CPD records. We came through quite strongly is that people want CPD qualifications. So it's got to have intellect, data sets, validation processes, etc. So I've said this a couple of times, but it's here again. The key design consideration is the difference between the database, which is the data layer, and then the system, which is the functional processes, the way we work it with. If you've got your database correct, you can actually play with your functional process. You can play with the way it actually presents that data. But that's got to be put in a way that's completely usable and user-friendly. That data must be good, and it must be, integrity is actually critical. It's got to be believable. Just about there. And then it's got to comply with POPIA requirements. POPIA requirements got a strong emphasis on data security. Obviously, that's probably the main thing. Role-based access control, secure storage, encryption, all that stuff. From a user perspective, I said a couple of times, it must be accessible, intuitive, multilingual. Designed to support scalability. I've said that the biggest challenge, and this is what every time I build databases, every time I've actually worked on things like this, the biggest problem is actually getting the content, and getting people to actually give you the information. First of all, they're suspicious. Why do you want it? Because it probably means they get why do you want it? It's my information. What's the value to it? And then maintaining it. So, your academics is possibly one of the easier places to start because they're all up, all that accreditation we have, and we can get hold of them, we know where to find them. I've actually spoken to journalists as part of one of the worlds I live in. Getting that lot to actually register is going to be quite interesting. So that's going to be the challenge, is actually getting the information. Building the back end is actually easier. It's getting that information and maintaining it. As I said, every 6 months, you're going to need to check everything. Right, we're on to report 2, which is
that's what you've done.
It's 3.
3 rather. Was this
key findings? Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I'm talking about. I've done with my time. I've done all this. We've told us.
Yeah.
Okay. Right.
That's it. Thanks very much, Ed. We're gonna pass it to you, Younger.
Thank you, Prof. Ed, could you just kindly assist me with the slides? But you can keep it here on that slide for now. Report number 3 was the third in a series of 4 interconnected reports. In our introduction of this third report, we had noted that South Africa's post-1994 constitutional and legislative frameworks position language as a foundational pillar for democracy, for social inclusion, access to justice, education, and economic participation. Through the Constitution of South Africa, the Pan-South African Languages Board Act and the South African Language Practitioners Council Act of 2014 have formally committed themselves to the protection of linguistic rights, the promotion of multilingualism, and the professionalization of language services. Despite this progressive policy environment, the language practitioner sector remains fragmented, unevenly regulated, and insufficiently resourced. This report responds directly to this gap by providing an assessment of practitioner knowledge, skills, professional development needs, regulatory readiness, and economic participation. The study integrates an extensive literature review, qualitative interviews, focus groups, and a national online survey of 142 respondents. Key findings highlight urgent requirements for standardized accreditation, mandatory continuing professional development, a better integration of human language technologies within the languages sector. The primary purpose of this third report was to establish a national diagnostic baseline for the language practitioner profession in South Africa. Specifically, the study assesses practitioner proficiency across official and selected non-official languages, educational qualifications, training pathways, professional competencies across key service areas, such as translation, interpreting, editing, terminology development, and language planning, and also some levels of awareness of national policy frameworks, legislative objectives, and linguistic rights. It further examines participation in continuing professional development, readiness for human language technologies, and pattern of income generation, sectoral demands, as well as emerging entrepreneurial opportunities. The first chapter on our theory review locates the needs assessment within a global economics of language approach, identifying language skills as a strategic form of human capital that drives employability and national competitiveness. It explores the structural transformation of language professions due to digitization and artificial intelligence, emphasizing that while technology is changing the field, human judgment and intercultural mediation remains irreplaceable. From the theory review, one key takeaway for me is that of the RAND team, where they investigated the economic returns of languages and developed a mathematical model of international trade flow. A major finding from this research was that not speaking a common language acted as a kind of tax. It made doing business much more difficult and expensive. So the RAND team then concludes that people speaking a second language will help business communication by removing the communication barrier. For example, if someone wants to set up a business in China, they need to be able to speak Mandarin. If someone wants to set up a shop in rural KZN, they need to be able to comprehend isiZulu. And to that end, the South African Language Practitioners Council Act of 2014 strongly supports and advances multilingualism through the regulation and promotion of language. You can move over to the next slide. Thank you, Ed. Mayike and Lema, in their joint paper of 2014, highlight that across the sector, many language practitioners, especially in the fields such as early childhood education and healthcare interpretation, have received little or inadequate professional training because of training programs that are often not accredited and standardized, leaving a workforce with varied skill levels and limited exposure to necessary approaches, hence the fragmentation between academia and industry. The review highlights a sector characterized by uneven professionalization, a lack of standardized training, and the absence of a unified regulatory authority. It notes a systematic under-evaluation of indigenous languages in both education and the labor market, and calls for more systematic research into the economic dimensions of language work in South Africa. Thank you, Ed. Chapter 3 provides an overview of the research methodology and methods that were used in this needs assessment of the knowledge and capacities of language practitioners, as outlined in the post-1994 legislative framework. The chapter examines the mixed method research approach and supporting methods, which included a policy and literature review, stakeholder identification, semi-structured interviews, online surveys, sectoral and ecosystem studies, as well as benchmarking analysis. This approach provided us the evidence base necessary to design a credible, inclusive, reliable database system that would eventually support professional recognition and sectoral development. We also used some notably AI tools at various stages to assist with data mining and synthesis of complex data sets. Next slide. Thank you, Ed. If you can see it's on my left, I'm assuming it's on your left as well. English and Afrikaans are the much more well-established languages in South Africa. They have more supported pathways through institutions, better funding, as well as more stable labor market demand. Where you can see there that on your right, the African languages and South African Sign Language in particular have limited pathways, fewer professional opportunities, and weaker institutions that have backing for financial support. Next slide. Thank you, Ed. Now, that the core recommendations that report number 3 provided was an urgent operation of the South African Language Practitioners Council and its mandated national database. The chapter provided a 4-phase implementation plan, moving from foundational governance to full economic empowerment and professionalization. You can see there on the diagram that we have those 4 pillars where we recommending that this is how the South African Language Practitioners Council is meant to work. One of the pillars is the tier classification system, a mandatory CPD framework, a national accreditation system, as well as practitioner, a national database. Next slide. Thank you, Ed. Now, one of the worries is the rapid advancement of artificial intelligence, which should not necessarily be a worry, and digital technologies. A lot of our participants were worried that it is reshaping the language profession worldwide. However, it's actually creating new opportunities and challenges for language practitioners. Rather than replacing human expertise, the technologies are expected to complement, with language professionals increasingly servicing as editors, verifiers, custodians of linguistic qualities. The artificial intelligence assisted the environments. To support this transition, the report recommends the development of a national human language technology strategy that strengthens the integration of language services into the digital age. It also emphasizes the importance of ensuring that African languages and South African Sign Language are fully represented in digital ecosystems to prevent their continued marginalization and to promote linguistic inclusivity in technological innovation. Next slide. Thank you, Ed.
Good job.
Okay, thank you. This chapter identifies critical barriers, including the risk. I believe it's the next one, Ed.
Okay.
Thank you. This chapter identifies critical barriers, including the risk of financial exclusion due to high registration fees, data privacy concerns, and the potential for job displacement due to misconceptions about artificial intelligence capabilities. However, the way forward is through a solid foundation for reform, where we have a strong potential for positive change, a coordinated implementation, where we're going to have clear roles and a unified strategy within the sector, as well as deliberate and inclusive approach. Also promoting a collaboration between the institutions that work within the sector. Now, in conclusion, The report recommends the urgent operation of the South African Language Practitioners Council, with immediate focus on professional regulation, accreditation and registration systems, and ethical oversight and tiered practitioner classification frameworks ranging from paraprofessional, professional, and expert. Accreditation criteria should prioritize practical experience and demonstrate competence alongside formal qualifications. A mandatory national continuing professional development framework should be introduced as a condition for ongoing professional registration. This framework must then address critical gaps in business skills, professional ethics, digital readiness, and human language technologies, while also recognizing prior learning for experienced practitioners without formal academic credentials. CPD must be affordable and digitally enabled and accessible across all provinces of South Africa. Thank you so much, colleagues, for your attention. That includes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, what's the other word?
Yeah, no, it's tremendous. Just, yeah, thank you very much. I will actually present.
All right, thank you very much, Ed. And good morning, everyone. So, report 4 of the series of papers on the economics of language is on higher education and training programs. Languages, sorry. So the report 4 of these series of papers on the economics of language is on higher education and training programs for language practitioners in South Africa. Sorry about that, everyone. Essentially, it gives a preliminary audit of this resource, which this report presents with the aim of supporting the operationalization of the South African Language Practitioners Council. In doing so, it evaluates the alignment between university curricula and the evolving demands of the digital language economy. It positions language as a strategic economic infrastructure, is essential for both national development and social inclusion. The report also establishes a national baseline for future. Oh, sorry about the slides. Oh, sorry. Oh, okay. Okay. Yeah, sorry about the slides. Yes. So, sorry about that, everyone. The report also establishes a national baseline for future research and policy development. Now the disconnect between traditional academic language teaching and the realities of a rapidly evolving and rapidly evolving technology-driven labor market is a matter. Chapter 1 of this report highlights as something that is growing. To this end, it argues that universities must shift towards a model that integrates lifelong learning, digital competence, and international and intercultural skills. The chapter emphasizes that language education should prepare graduates not only for academic knowledge, but for practical workplace relevant competencies. It also stresses the importance of developing soft skills, including communication, adaptability, and cross-cultural understanding. Now, South Africa's constitutional commitment to multilingualism forms the basis for this provision of higher education and training programs for language practitioners in South Africa. And this is explored in Chapter 3 of this report, where it is argued to provide a strong legislative foundation for the language sector. The chapter highlights the South African Languages Practitioners Council Act of 2014 as a critical policy instrument intended to formalize and regulate the profession. The chapter frames the report as a strategic bridge between an informal association-based system and a structured statutory regulatory model. However, it also indicates that despite the strong policy frameworks, the sector remains underdeveloped and poorly coordinated. Now, the mismatch between academic training and labor market requirements in the language sector is identified as significant in Chapter 5 of this report. Now, although language graduates often achieve long-term employment, they experience a conversion lag, meaning they struggle to secure employment immediately after graduation. This is largely due to a lack of applied technical skills, digital literacy, and business competencies. The chapter highlights the need for curricula to better reflect real-world demands, including specialization and practical application. Now, one of the tools we used in drawing up this report comprised of an online survey around language programs across higher education institutions. The results reveal a tiered system of provision, with English dominating most programs, while African languages are less consistently supported. The survey also highlights the funding constraints, limited program diversity, and weak links to employment pathways. Overall, the system lacks strong coordination between education providers and industry needs. Another tool we made use of comprised of qualitative interviews with stakeholders across the sector, which Chapter 7 of this chapter draws on. A major concern identified is the foundational literacy crisis, which affects students entering the higher education. Even graduates are reported to lack basic language accuracy, technical precision, and professional communication skills. The chapter also highlights a gap of business language proficiency, which is essential for workplace success. Now, a recalibrated curriculum architecture is proposed in Chapter 8 of this report, which is designed to align education with industry needs. The model is based on five key pillars: which are functional language mechanics, digital and AI integration, entrepreneurship and business skills, domain-specific specialization, and work-integrated learning. The chapter also recommends mandatory registration with the South African Language Practitioners Council and the introduction of continuous professional development systems. These reforms aim to ensure that graduates are work-ready and adaptable in a rapidly changing environment. So, colleagues, essentially, language is not only a means of communication, it is a driver of economic participation and national development. Thank you, Prof.
Yeah, thanks, Thank you very much.
Right, colleagues, I'm going to just give us a short concluding overview and just make some strategic points. And then, though we scheduled for 12, if I can, with your support and blessing, extend this session, our workshop, to about 20 for those who are able to stay, so that there's some time for discussion. And then what we'll also do is SAC will look to provide a site for future discussion and possibly down the line some additional workshops, because we've covered a fair amount of material. There's the importance of reflexivity and interaction between the stakeholders and SACO and importantly DSAC and PANCEL as well as crucial. So this is probably the starting point for this broader discussion. Key findings from the reports: preliminary scoping exercise. We showed how the language sector contributed a not insignificant amount to the economy. This could be improved. It's probably undercounted, undermapped, and we're going to talk a bit more about that right at the end of this discussion. We stressed the importance for a national database design and management, and we actually developed in that particular report 3, a working model and a methodology. The report 3 looked at the needs and capacity assessment. So there's a highly experienced and educated workforce, but practitioners face economic productivity and income instability. Report 4 also looked at the question of the education and training programs and linked to needs assessment. We noticed the gap between tertiary training and functional requirements. And this is not confined to South Africa, this is international. But there are significant changes. And you find internationally in the development literature and business development and economic policy literature, there's significant emphasis these days on competencies, capabilities, CPD, in other words, continuous professional development, and a range of accompanying qualifications. Crucial with language training is actually soft skills, it's intercultural communication. And it's a blend of also building things such as leadership, team building, and so on. So that's actually quite crucial. So it means that you're not just looking at 1 or 2 majors. You're actually looking at building a more complex but functional practitioner. Graduate who actually has a range of qualities and can continue to develop those qualities after graduation. So, but also generally, we noticed an expand, and as we went through this, we noticed that for the dynamics and the breadth of South Africa's language sector challenges and language economy challenges, we probably had to expand the notion of language practitioners. We suggested a way forward, but we also need to look at sort of seemingly anomalous instances where somebody might have, say, a major in English literature, and do they, or French literature, or Arabic one. How does that kind of those sorts of those sorts of qualifications, are these language practitioners? So we felt that we needed to look possibly at a conceptual widening of what we understand as a language practitioner, and that is a debate which is emerging globally, and it needs to be located in South Africa as well. One of the interesting aspects is actually the decline in some top universities internationally in literature training, and the the lost opportunities by such narrowing of funding, and because language and literature training provides crucial inputs into creativity, understanding of the complexity of social reality of human life, and that's an extraordinarily important antidote and counterpoint to a tendency to utilize AI applications for a restructuring of work. So that's the debate that these reports address, but should be something for future research. So we need to expand the notion of language practitioners, and we need to take, as we mentioned, we need to look more creatively and developmentally at indigenous languages. And given as we mentioned, the constraints of budgetary constraints in South Africa, impact on our low growth rate and on massive unemployment, we need to look for smarter, more incorporative ways of actually bolstering indigenous languages and vernacular languages in South Africa. And we're going to have to look at smart solutions, including this impacts on the universities, we feel. Recommendations, government regulations, we've gone through the importance of setting up regulatory and institutional provisions there. Skills and professional development, we've talked about those from CPDs to practitioner training, incorporating digital skills in language training, but also bearing in mind that a lot of future work will be with language practitioners, kind of providing a human aspect, and a rounding off of AI applications, and also means of actually localizing and extending and refining such applications. So there will probably be, in some respects, increasing work, but there has to be significant consideration of that. So curriculum and training reform is actually called for, and this is going to be thoroughgoing. And there are also a range of economic empowerment and inclusion options mentioned that we've raised here, and how we can actually look to utilize public mechanisms to actually enable economic empowerment within the language sector. So, and among the specific short-term policy recommendations from the reports, I'll just run through them very quickly. One, the professionalization of the sector, including, as we stressed throughout our presentation, the operationalization of the South African Language Practitioners Council for it to become a dynamic leading international body. We also have presented the argument in a separate report, 23-24 report on South Africa's trade with BRICS economy in creative goods and services. And we advised a virtual language academy, and that could be an interagency project. Just makes perfect sense. So, and that would involve inter-university collaboration. We've also advised an interdepartmental committee of DSAC and DTIC to look at language, because both the DTIC and also Department of Science and Technology and Innovation, need to look more directly at the role of language in promoting innovation and economic development. So also we've put forward the argument of the importance or the recommendation that dialogue with business be headed by the DSAC National Languages Division, including the universities. We've talked about the formal mapping of the language economy and the creation of a satellite account, and I can report that at the National Language Summit in Cape Town in March this year, we have been approached by South Africa to include questions on the language economy in their labor surveys and their other statistical surveys, and that is actually going to provide a whole range of interesting and new and very useful data. And need for future research on cost-effective funding options for the language economy. Let me just get this thing right here. And then finally, look for shared resources in the HEI sector. So basically, there seems to be significant opportunities for more collaborative possibilities in the university sector, particularly in South Africa. There's a range of interesting and very useful work going through, but there seems to be an underusage of existing resources. And what one notices too in looking at the programs, relatively little modest ways in terms of interacting with other faculties and providing key courses in a range of other programs. Business schools, for example, have relatively modest inputs from language and literature departments, and that's changing internationally. And the SICWA declaration at the language summits, which provides a call for action and a framework for language equity, contains an interesting slide. It talks about, or set an interesting preamble, talks about strengthening research-based knowledge sharing, importance of evidence-based language policies, and importance of better assessing the size and contribution of language to sustainable development. It also talks about and notes the importance of embedding an economics of language approach in the preamble, and that's contingent. That followed on the presentation of a shorter version of this particular presentation to the Language Summit at one of the plenary sessions. So the SICWA declaration looks to embody an economics of language approach and an evidence-based. So that is a call to future research. It's a call to look to more coherent aspects of institutionalizing such an approach, and also to improved interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary interventions. Questions and comments are going to follow us. I'm going to ask my colleague Ed if he can just manage that for the next 20 minutes or so, and we'll see how that goes. And I'll pass it to you, Ed.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for hanging in there and seeing the presentation. I think we will be sharing the presentation. Yeah, with everybody who's seen it. So any comments? Just remember to unmute, not like I did just now. Stop sharing.
Any raised hands?
Chat.
From 100 people.
Don't see any raised hands, so if you, hang on, no, we don't see any comments?
Maybe just read through the comments, we can maybe ask we can respond to some of those comments.
Well, comments are mostly, we can't see you, we can't hear you, we can't.
Okay.
Yeah, so yeah, that's the
We can have just ask people to maybe just raise their hands.
Attendees, okay, we're two raised hands.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Marty? Hello?
Maybe she must unmute or even unmute.
Yeah, just unmute. Marty?
Okay. They probably need to be enabled, just kidding.
Colleagues, we're just checking whether the line is enabled. Oh, is that one? It's not coming through.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, we're busy trying to sort that out.
Going to be enabled.
Yeah.
Okay, you should be enabled now. Can you see if we can hear you? No.
Is it another hand?
No, it's just the one.
Yeah.
What are they seeing on the thing?
Yeah.
Thanks for that from Mr. Lemon. Fantastic presentation. Fills me with hope and excitement for the future of the language profession. Okay, let's just see. We've got here. Sipati, see if you can actually, if we can hear you.
Hello, Sipati, your hand is up.
Ah, great. Thank
Hello.
you. Yeah, cool. Go for it.
Hello there.
Can you? Hello.
Hello, yeah,
Hi.
we can hear you.
Yeah, we
Yes,
hear you.
go for it.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this event, and also for the presentations. I kind of miss
Anak earphones andiva yonke le nto.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Sorry, Sipati. Carry on.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
okay. It sounds like other people are speaking.
Yes, there was. Yeah.
I was saying I kind of missed the impact of the AI in languages. I don't see it featuring that much, because as a language practitioner, I work in the translations and voice-over production. And there is a big worry about what's going to happen, and when it comes to the AI, the impact of AI in what we are doing, and also how can it enhance translations and voiceovers without threatening the jobs in the industry. So I'm not sure whether I missed that part where there was emphasis on AI or not. So I would like us to look into that space and look at what is it that we can, so that we are not left behind. I know that there are other institutions that are busy right now working on integrating AI into the languages that we can partner with, but they are not out there so that we know about them. So I would like to see also partnerships in that area. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. You have a go, and then ask Grant to say something.
Yeah, I can respond to that. You're actually 100% right. In our interviews and that, we found that people hadn't thought about AI enough. We did ask about it, but the responses we got were what we've got there. It's such a big thing. It does need a separate look at and some serious work. One of the good things that came out of the stuff, though, is that AI only works if you actually understand language yourself. As you've used it now, you'll find the more intelligent your question, the more intelligent the answer. So that's the basic of language, and that's basic of language proficiency. And I don't think that message is getting across or getting through to whoever is in authority or whoever has got to make decisions, or we're not selling ourselves properly. If you haven't got a grasp on language, you haven't got a grasp on thinking. You think in a language, whatever language it is, and you can only, after these questions, you can only evaluate the answers. You can only evaluate questions that have been put to you if you've got a grasp of the language. So the AI helps you, and you're right. But I think we're seeing more and more. In my work, I'm seeing more and more limitations to the AI. But yes, we do need to do more work on it.
Ask Grant.
Grant, have you got an input on that? Or yeah, Younger.
Yeah, I think I think it's not just the language sector. I think it's all sectors of the economy are grappling with this issue about how AI is going to impact them. And I think what needs to happen is there needs to be an intense focus on understanding how AI can be used as a tool and as a resource, because I think the technology is not going to go away, and so a lot of our working world is going to change across all of our lives, and across all sectors, not just the language economy. So I think the winners in this time to come will definitely be the sectors, countries, economies that harness this resource effectively. So I think there definitely needs to be investment made in ensuring that, like Ed said, people are equipped and trained in how to make full use of that resource, because I think it's the only reliable means by which we can defend ourselves from the harmful impacts of such technology, because obviously there is a very real risk. But I think beyond putting safeguards in place, and there are maybe some policy recommendations which could be made to control the way that AI is implemented. But beyond that, if we look internationally, other countries are at the moment very busy with investing in AI resources, not just in terms of technology, but in skills. So we would need to have the same focus in South Africa. And I think improving the coordination between stakeholders in the language space is the first step towards having a coordinated response for AI itself.
Just to add to those comments, there's already extensive discussion of the developments happening in terms of thinking on curricula and the demands of industry in report 3, and it looks at the range of kinds of the competencies and skills that are needed in new language practitioner training, or that universities and tertiary institutions need to consider. And part of it is actually learning to work particularly with the human language kind of machine language learning platforms and applications, and developing skills that hone the human interface. And in fact, a lot of the talk about the 5IR, the shift to 5IR, is actually looking to find that AI or machine learning, which is not dissimilar. Kind of looking to find the hybrid versions and the interface between them. Interpreting, improving, localizing, and so on. But along with that, the emphasis is on that the language practitioners deepen their digital skills. That's crucial. That enables that already gives the language practitioner more scope in terms of future work and working with it, and also moving to these hybrid. Also, higher language skills and proficiency, as Ed has stressed, and a range of soft skills are also important, like working within team environments and so on, and also cross-cultural management, cross-cultural communication is stressed, and one is actually also improving one's specialism. So if you've got a particularly high-end language specialism, this will be beyond most the capacity of even the most advanced language machines in terms of looking at localized and sub-regional aspects of potential work, whether it be looking at a particular, even making an ad or doing a PR piece, or taking a piece of a play and adapting it, or script writing for a particular locale, and that, because often the product is fairly general, and so it's giving that particularity. But particularly in report 3, which will be available shortly, one can actually look at it. We'll take cognizance of your request, possibly send something through to you.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're running out of. Okay, Quincy, sorry, I think you're next.
Thank you, colleagues, and thank you for the presentation. I think I came a little bit late, but perhaps a few questions would be, some of my concerns would be, you would be able to respond. And one of the issues that I did not see or hear in the highlight of the presentations where I was listening was my concern is the Kru and Kwe or your Khoisan particularly language, because of it is not even declared even today as an official language. It's still treated as a language, but not given, I think, I'll stand to be corrected, the same status as the other 11 languages, which includes also the sign language. And then also, my concern is within the African languages, especially at provincial level, I have realized that there is no political will to implement the language policy at a provincial level, because of I was participating in the past, I think back then in 10 years when Pan South African Language Board was coming on board and trying to promote the idea of language policies at a provincial level to a municipal level. But you find that most of those policies at provincial level have not found any implementation or any day of light, either with somebody not responding to that. And I'm just wondering that, has the research also taken into consideration some of those efforts that were taken, and perhaps has it picked up is there any traction around at provincial level with regards to that? And then my other concern is the lack of commercialization of language practitioners as a career, and as a career that influences a number of trades, and then at the same time we find that there is less funding in terms of opportunities as alternative careers for young people, especially when you look at our academia results. But otherwise, thank you for the presentation. I just wanted to have your view on some of those points. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Those are good points.
No, thanks. Yeah. If I could just, thanks very much. If I can just respond quickly, some of those questions of language policy and that you're raising, and more devolution of authority and resources at provincial level aren't within the mandate of these 4 linked reports, only indirectly. But I do know in terms of Khoi and linked languages that the National Language Division is actually planning to look to explore the possibility of such languages becoming part of the array of national languages. And in the National Language Summit Declaration, the SICWA Declaration, there's further material points made about these particular issues that you raise, and the means of addressing it. And interesting, at that declaration, there were about 23, 24 professors of language and linguistics. I know because the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture stressed the importance of being so many professors there. So one would actually hope that those issues are being addressed, and there's more commitment of resources. As we have mentioned here, that we are aware that because of state funding and Treasury holding the purse strings, new smarter solutions have to be made. It can't just be state resourcing, because you have to make cuts in some other department, and those are part of the real issues. And there's only so much one can do in terms of direct funding. So that's why smart and public-private partnerships come in. But thank you very much.
Peter? Mr. McQuay. Hello, Peter. Still with us?
Peter?
Just unmute.
Can you unmute?
Okay, we're getting it.
Okay, I see somebody else.
Zanele?
Good afternoon, Prof and team, and good afternoon to the colleagues on the platform. I just want to check if you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Prof, I've got questions here from Lisa. She's been kicked out of the platform, but she's trying to join in, but she was worried that maybe by the time she comes again, maybe it will be too late. Thank you for the presentations of the 4 reports. I think they are informative, and they are helping us and make us realize that there is a lot of work that we still need to do as language practitioners and also as the drivers of the process. But the questions from Lisa, there are 2. The first one, she wanted to know from the IOL report as to, you've given us the direct impact of languages to economy in terms of the numbers, how much are we making and how much are we contributing. But she wanted to know have you been able to estimate the induced impact in terms of how many language practitioners are from maybe publishing companies, how many are from government, how many are from giving those statistics as to how many are from each sector do we have, and how much are they contributing in this in the economy. And the second one is, were you able to maybe come up with the disaggregated language practitioners in terms of those that are in the language, those that are language practitioners in the language field, and those that are language practitioners in the non-language institutions, like maybe from the banks, from the hospitals, but we find that they are practicing as language practitioners. She wanted to know if you do have such kind of statistics. And if not, what would be the way forward? Is there another study maybe that will follow up to check if we can have those numbers?
So
Thank
maybe,
you.
hello. I'm glad. I'm sorry, Lisa. There's some technical. I'll ask the SACCO team what can be done there. I think some of those in terms of disaggregating and I'm going to ask Grant to deal directly with this question. The resources and the time on these particular reports. I think that was actually that's mentioned as follow-up research. So that probably can be done, but it would also require more this mooted collaboration with Stats SA in terms of getting some of those questions. Yeah. But I'm just going to ask Grant just to add to my compact remark here. Grant.
Yes. So, firstly, with the current data that is available, we can't really go too much into detail in terms of where different language practitioners reside in the economy, and especially outside of those that are directly easily observable as linked to the language economy. So in our research, we identified, and it's kind of widely known at this stage, with Census 22, there were quite a lot of challenges with regards to the release of that data. And what we found was comparing the data from 2022 to other data sets, especially Census 2011, that there were significant differences in employment, of sector employment, which raises some questions about the accuracy of those results. And so we'd have to see over time, because obviously the Stats SA is constantly releasing new data and they're refining things and everything. So we have to see how that develops. But there's a significant challenge with the availability of data on employment. And as I said in my section in report 1, a lot of language sector employment, what we would consider, looking broadly at the language economy, what we would consider as professions linked to language are not easily discernible from the available data. So I think the only way to really address that is to expand on the work that was done with the language mapping, work with the broader stakeholder base to do a comprehensive study on employment of different types within each organization, within each region, to try and get a more accurate figure. And then there would need to be a sort of a companion study looking at the types of employment and the number of people employed in professions in the private sector that could be considered to be language professionals, or at least adjacent to language professionals. So I hope that covers that. But the simple answer is that there is more work to be done to fully explore that. Some work has been done in our study to try and to contextualize the size of the Language Practitioner Council, how big that database might be, how many people it should need to accommodate in order to try and get to some figures on, what would be the appropriate membership fees, and what would the type of income be that would come into that type of organization. But these are very high level estimations at this point, and work would need to be done to fine tune that.
Yeah, and that would be one of the primary functions of the council, is to actually get a grip on that industry, on the sector.
Yeah. So Nelly, so thanks, Grant. So I think we also raised the importance of setting up a satellite account, which will actually work provide us with an ongoing database on that score. But the willingness of Stats SA to work with DSAC and SACO in terms of providing new questions in their labour force survey is going to provide answers to this particular conundrum of finding more granular data, which we can't dig out from existing Stats SA material. So the logical thing, and it actually has been recommended via SACO, is actually to expand to look for an expanded study, precisely along the lines that you and Lisa have outlined. Yeah.
We are now running out of Peter, are you back up? Or
No,
you...
no, yeah.
Thank you, Prof.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Yeah. Peter, yeah, we can.
Peter, can we hear you? Peter, you're on mute.
Yes, am I audible, everybody?
Now we can hear you. Cool.
Yeah, now you can hear me. Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks for this opportunity and also most enjoyable presentations that have been made up to this point in time, the whole morning. So I think as language practitioners, we really needed some of these. But I just wanted to make a comment, really, not so much of a question, but there might be a question thrown in there. But I'm coming from the standpoint of earlier on, I had actually mentioned that I wanted to add to Sipati's comments on the thoughts that she was expressing. You know, I feel that a whole lot of people in our industry, in the language practitioning industry, when it comes to AI, many of us, I think, are in denial of accepting what the reality is. So during the presentation, one of the presenters actually mentioned that AI is here to augment the industry. But, you know, from where I'm sitting, and if you are a translator who's been there for quite a long time, I'm sure some of them will agree with me if I say that AI has actually destroyed our industry when it comes to being a translator. It has totally destroyed it. And I'll tell you why I'm saying this. Because, you know, even as the presentation mentioned, we are now basically used as verifiers, as proofreaders, if you like, you know, and things like that, as editors, not so much as translators, since AI actually came into the picture. But my biggest worry about being that is that many of the clients, I don't know if maybe many translators are afraid to express this. That's why I'm saying some of them maybe might be in denial. But what has been happening to, at least to me and some that I know, is that a client will come to you and actually gives you a material to work on, maybe to edit. A material these days
You've
for
joined.
which, sorry?
Or yeah, the answer
Yeah.
to these questions is that the data does not cover that yet, but there will be there. Oh.
I've been interrupted. I'm not sure who's saying what.
That's right. I don't know either. Okay, carry on.
Yeah. And then I was saying that these days, one of the most horrible things that is happening, especially due to AI, a client gets the material and they give to you as a translator a machine translated material.
You are muted.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Somebody says I'm muted.
Can you?
Okay, and then what happens is, for an example, just a quick one. They give you a machine translated material. They say, please edit this for us. A material that could have given is, let's say, 4,500. I'm gonna make that example bluntly as it is. Maybe the material is gonna give you 4,500 to work on it. Today, they come with such a material and then they actually limit you just because this is a material that has been put through the machine translation. And they say to you, we would like you to work on this material for 3 hours at 150 rands per hour. Imagine that. That's what most of the clients are doing today. So now, as one of the presentations mentioned, the research found that our African languages are actually so low rated. They are not really being appreciated at all, or actually the translators are really not being appreciated in this country. So from my standpoint and other translators, we feel that AI actually has totally destroyed our industry and actually has destroyed our income. But now why I'm saying this, where is the South African Language Practitioners Council? We have had a meeting with them. At that time when I was still the head of the South African Translators Institute, we had a very productive meeting with them. 2 years ago, and then we were basically at the meeting. The main objective of the meeting was to see basically how SALPC is going to continue to work with the South African Translators Institute also on the side, etc., etc. But really, the ultimate goal here was to be able to protect language practitioners in this country and to see to it that their rights are being held up. So now, these are the things that we are experiencing in the industry right now. To this day, we are still waiting for SALPC to go into action and to see to it that the industry is regulated. So for some of us, believe me, AI has destroyed our industry completely.
Thank
And
you.
Peter,
yeah.
thanks, Peter. Sorry, we actually running out of time.
Yeah.
Very, very good points. Yeah. Sorry, we just, okay, Richard's going to say.
If I can just say something, Peter, thank you very much. Basically, I think what you're saying is that, the crisis particularly in terms of the interpreting translation industry and the impact. I think that is a call for a specialist piece of research, which I think the head of the National Languages Services can look to decide upon. But it would seem to be that would be a recommendation from our side based on what you're saying, to look at the situation, how there can be some remedy from official sources. So I'm very glad that you've raised those issues, and that will be recorded and duly responded to.
Thank you. Thank you very much for taking my thoughts. Lovely.
Yeah, Kevin, thank you very much, Peter. Kevin, can you keep it short, please?
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, colleagues. I hope you can hear me. This is really profound, groundbreaking research work, and you've given us really about 2 hours of very dense work. And I think when you called for feedback, I think it was just to say what kind of feedback can really be given after such density of work. I hope you do realize that the work still raises more questions than answers. I mean, given where we are in South Africa. And I want to just pick on just a couple of these that I think your initial research starts off global, and I thought when you came back, there was something a bit missing about the local context. I do understand that this seems to be much more targeted at language professionals, but I'm hoping there's a translation to the benefit to an ordinary South African. And I'm also very pleased that you did question the context of where language practitioner is. So I think what I was hoping to get, and maybe I'm not sure if I'm talking to future research, is the role of language in the economic development of a people. I did see something on development, sort of economic development, but I think that needed to be a bit more expanded. And really in their everyday economic participation. I also note that the language you use still remains highly capitalist. So the language of human capital, of labor, of work as employment. And I just wonder if some of the problems we're having currently is that the economic sphere really tends to be much more framed as English and as coming from elsewhere, and therefore we may be running short of really taking the language economy and using it to really developing people and enabling them looking at more at economic participation more broadly than just work, because I think the quality of work is really declining. I think an example has been given in language practitioners' comments over here, but really this is really across all spheres. And I also want to just point out that there's an undertone, and I'm not sure if I got this right, I stand to be corrected, but I felt like there was an assumption that South Africa is sort of English speaking, or that English does not pose a challenge in sort of knowledge acquisition. Because I think for me, this is where the language economy really should be coming in to address the sort of position of many South Africans as far as access to knowledge for meaningful economic participation. I think that wasn't there. And then so I also heard some reference to African languages. And then I think on there, I think maybe with the South African Language Professionals Council, I think that was kind of covered, but I wasn't very clear what role would the South African Language Professionals Council be playing in the development of African languages, and what would be the economic value contribution of that kind of role. And in this case, I was hoping to get some sort of examples of contexts of economic participation or expansion where the availability of African languages actually augment economic participation and growth due to the knowledge that it affords. So, sorry, colleague, as I said, I'm hoping this is more of questions
Thanks,
that you
Kevin. Kevin,
raised.
if I can respond very briefly, the use of things, the use of concepts such as human capital, they're part of a broad approach, which we stressed right at the beginning, is the need for more collaboration between linguistics, education sciences, economics, and more interdisciplinary approaches. And within economics, you get different schools, and including economic sociology and social economics, and heterodox economics. But those are concepts, and so it's a bit more than just capitalism, because I think you'll find a broadly based approach. And in fact, we actually make the point in this, and it is a piece for a report in its own right, to look at the relationship between developing indigenous languages, providing more resources, and finding ways to incorporate those into economic, industrial, and social development issues. They're not being done sufficiently, the process, and it can be done relatively cost effectively. And this includes looking at aspects such as climate, the role of indigenous languages and climate transformation, and in sustainable development initiatives, the green initiatives, and that's possible, but it requires a reorientation of a significant reorientation of resources, government resources. And that becomes partly political, but there's what is possible in South Africa, and particularly in language, is actually finding ways of empowering the people who are using it at local level, and that's not happening enough, and that could be relatively cost effective, but there has to be a rethinking of some of the orthodox means of doing policy, say in the DTI and science and technology and other government departments, and more liaison, and also more use of scarce resources. Because at the moment, we're not doing that sufficiently. The universities aren't talking sufficiently to each other on those sorts of courses. I think there's significant positive shifts within language policy at universities, from what I can see. And what we can see as a team. There's significant developments happening there. And also with the language summit declaration, that's a serious declaration of intent by government. But I think there is need for more research, as you say. But I think an EOL approach will actually provide more cost-effective and provide ways of actually providing more funds, more recognition for that economy. That's crucial. It won't happen without it. So I think a dialogue and more interdisciplinary and cross-disciplinary work, which is strongly recommended, will actually make for better policy. And crucially, as we said, there's no shortage of language policy. It's also improving implementation. If I can just pull off 15.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. Great. Thanks, guys. We've actually now run over by 34 minutes. Thank you very much for anybody hung in here. I'm sorry, we can't have any more. We will share this and share any thoughts you have. Send them to Bella.
Yeah, to Bella, if you want to.
So to Bella, if you want to
some final. It's okay.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry about the glitches that we had, and because the session was so hot, it went over for 30 minutes. And I think also the technology is suffering from Bafana Win, given that some of us have not slept since yesterday. I would like to give Takalo, who's the head of SACO from DSEC, to just give us some few kind words to close the session. Thank you.
Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon to everyone on the platform. Thank you so much to Professor Haynes and the team for such impactful and wonderful presentation on the wonderful research that was done. And from the engagements that we've been having on the platform, it is obvious that this is one of the most important issue in the sector, and it should be taken out of this platform, and we continue the engagements outside this platform. And the question is, what are we going to do as we come out of here in your specific office in the sector where you are in? What are we going to do with this finding? Like I said yesterday to those that were in attendance of the sports language calculator yesterday, the fact that the research findings are there. They are findings that are indicating that there is a place for us to start implementation of some of these findings that we are getting from beautiful research work that is being done. Resources are being put in place for us to come up with research findings. But what are we doing in the sector as government, as people that are in the sector, to ensure that there is implementation of these results? And I think the critical issues for me were the fact that the language sector is fragmented, it is less coordinated, there is lack of policy recognition, limited support for practitioners, and even it's uneven in terms of language policy implementation. Those areas are saying to us there is more that we should be doing as a sector, as government. There is more that we should be doing to ensure that we are speaking in one voice, to ensure that policy is being implemented correctly. And also the other issue that stood out for me was the fact that language sector is significant, but it is under-recognized, and it is said to listen to people that are in the sector experiencing or indicating their challenges daily within the sector. And the question is, what are we going to do as we walk out of here to make sure that we improve and preserve what we already have in the sector so that we don't lose what we already have? And there's also a need for us to share resources equally, because one of the findings was indicating that more English and Afrikaans are being more resourced, but other African languages are not resourced. So there is a gap for us to ensure that there is a fairness in terms of equally sharing resources to make sure that even other African languages are also recognized. And lastly, it is also important to also note the finding which says languages, South Africa does not lack language policy. It lacks institutional implementation and economic integration. I cannot emphasize that beyond what is already said. And also the fact that language is not only for communication, but is a driver of economic growth. And it was important and also quite interesting for us to see the impact that language is having in terms of economic growth. It indicates to us that if we give this sector a chance, there will be more employment, there will be much better improvement in terms of our economic growth. And colleagues, I'm also happy to hear that the presentations will be shared with all that are in the platform. It will also encourage us to go through the presentations in our own individual spaces and continue. I'm challenging all of us to continue this engagement as we walk out of this meeting. Let's go out there and make much more noise so that we see the improvement and the implementation that we intend to see. Titus, thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Sakalo. Thank you very much, Prof. and your team. And thanks everyone for attending. Without you, we wouldn't be able to share this important work that we are doing. Have a great weekend. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah. Colleagues and everybody attending, and if anybody's hearing, it's finished.
No, everyone's here.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mba.
Yeah, Mr. Mavala, thank you very much for that wonderful closing set of remarks. It's very inspiring. Thank you very much. And if everybody can have it from our side, that we really we're glad everybody essentially stayed with us, and we really appreciate the interaction and the comments and reception. Yeah. Thank you.